Hello, everybody. I'm Everton de Oliveira from the Groundwater Project, and I welcome you to to our show. Porque o mundo precisa de água, because the world needs water. A program dedicated to exploring the critical role of water in our lives, our environment, and our future. And today, I have the pleasure to welcome a special guest, a friend of mine that I think I may say that because I started listening to his podcasts, What About Water, which is very sad he stopped doing that because I learned to listen to his voice and to his interviews, which were very nice. So Jay is a renowned hydrogeologist, a global authority on water security, and someone who has truly shaped how we understand groundwater and global water scarcity. He held key roles at NASA, the University of California, the University of Saskatchewan, and is widely renowned for translating complex science into public understanding and action. Today, we will explore his journey, his insights on the current state of the world's water, and what can we do to protect this vital role. So, Jay, thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure having you here. You spent much of your career researching and communicating global water challenges. What first drew you to the field of hydrogeology, and what made you focus so strongly on water sustainability as a global cause? Welcome. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me, Everton. Thank you for that introduction. I really appreciate it. Um, I get drawn into the water field, the broad environmental field, really as a teenager. So I grew up on the East Coast of the United States in New England. I was born and raised in Rhode Island, and in that part of the 20th century, that's when we first started thinking about the environment in the United States, and where I lived, it was like the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, and so the rivers were heavily contaminated,
Sure.
and that really sort of caught my attention. The beaches were polluted, and we couldn't eat the fish, and this was all when I was, say, between 10 and 15, 16 years old.
Okay.
So that when I went to college, I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian, but I got very, very interested in geology and ended up majoring in geology. And then over time, began focusing on water. It was also sort of the time when satellites were just getting going, and going beyond sort of, astronauts and exploring space and turning those satellites around and looking at Earth. And so that sort of coincided with my time in graduate school. And so one thing led to another, and here I am.
I learned from your work, right? When you came here, before you came here, I was studying your work because, I personally, I have my podcast here, and you had yours, and I was always looking for people talking about water. And your talk on water there it was like you had a very open view for different situations, not only for hydrogeology, as your formation would might indicate. Okay, so and then I learned all about your work, researching and stuff, and and then you have all the work with the Grace. So, through satellite data and large-scale modeling, your research has helped uncover critical trends in groundwater depletion around the world, which is quite interesting. Could you share a few examples where this data has led to real policy or management change, please?
Well, I wish I could say it was all over the world. But it hasn't been, and that's something that you and I have talked about, and we need to keep working on.
Yeah.
So we've had important successes in a few different places. Our first big paper on groundwater depletion was on India, and northwestern India, and the groundwater depletion that was happening there. And so that work is often cited by Indian water ministers and the Central Groundwater Board as really inspiring the National Hydrogeological Assessment. that was kicked off there. So that was one thing that we're quite proud of. Another important contribution I think our work has made is actually within NASA, but it sort of works through the federal government in the United States, and that is that our work. So the original Grace mission was only supposed to last. It launched in 2002. It was supposed to last 5 years, and it ended up lasting more like 15 years. And somewhere in there around 2010 in the United States, we started planning for thinking about what will the next Grace mission be.
Explain what grace is for some of
Oh, sure,
our
of
listeners
course.
might not
Yeah,
know,
I'm
please.
so sorry about that. Okay,
No, that's
so
okay. You're welcome.
yeah, I work with a satellite, NASA and a German space agency, DLR, satellite called GRACE, which stands for the Gravity Recovery and Climate Experiment. It's a really unusual satellite in that it works more like a scale in the sky than like a camera or a big some kind of sensor or thermometer or something like that. Um, so it responds to since water is so profoundly heavy that when there's a big flood or a big drought over a region, it's either gained a lot of mass, water mass, or lost a lot of water mass. And the satellites, the way they respond to that is that there's a greater gravitational tug when there's more water on the ground and they get pulled down a little bit closer to Earth. And when there's less water on the ground, say because of a big drought or groundwater depletion in a big aquifer, there's less of a gravitational tug on the satellites and they float a little bit higher in their orbit. So we keep track very accurately of the ups and downs of this scale, and we're able to convert that into changes in water mass. So back to some impacts then. So then our work was one of the primary justifications for accelerating the launch of the second GRACE mission, which was actually originally slated for 2025. So we would have gone from 2017 until now with no data. But our work was one of the primary justifications for moving that launch date up from 2025 to 2018. The third thing I think is probably we're most proud of is that our work in California, and not just the satellite work, but the communications around the satellite work, the lectures, the writing, the opinion pieces, the media interviews, um, are recognized as being a major reason why the Groundwater Sustainability Act of 2014 was put on the ballot and passed. The way we were able to take the conversation, as some of my colleagues in government used to say, take the conversation out of the state house in California and to the people.
Perfect, perfect. Yeah, that's very good. That's very good. What about I mentioned your podcast. You did an excellent job in bringing science and storytelling. That is quite interesting. I like that a lot. I try to practice myself. What did you learn from that experience and about how to better engage the public and even policymakers on water issues? Did it work, or why did you stop that? I had a lot of fun. I remember once I was walking I have a house at the beach there, and I was walking like in the morning and listening to the guy. I think he's from Iran or something like that.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Nick Kosar. Yeah.
That was quite interesting. Could please tell us that.
Yes. So I learned many things. I mean, I learned about the art of podcasting. I did it for 5 years, and we started by just, if we had a visiting speaker at University of Saskatchewan, we just sit down and have a conversation. To by the time we were done, very strategic, very thoughtful, very well planned, and I think very well produced
Yep.
podcast. We were able to really get some high level guests on there in a short amount of time. Um, so, what have I learned? I learned that podcast took a lot of time, um, and and that's
Yeah.
the reason why I stopped. No other reason. It was in the transition from moving from Canada back to the United States, and I was so busy when I first started here that it was just too much of a a hill to climb. That said, I'm starting to think about getting back into it.
You should.
Uh, so I learned that the podcasts actually have a surprising reach. Um, and I'm very proud. I was very surprised by that, and now, in hindsight, very proud of that. And it reached, many levels. So people in government would say, I listened to your podcast. Had asked someone in the Arizona state government to be on the podcast, and this person said, "Oh, I've been listening to your podcast for a long time." Or, I could meet someone met someone in the private sector when I was at COP28. And this person, I think, worked for Xylem and said, "Oh, I know you. You're the podcast guy." Um, so I think that, it's a great, people listen to podcasts.
Yep.
And I think that if they're well produced, and I can't take much credit for the production, I hired a production team. So if they're well put together and you have interesting guests and interesting stories, people really want to listen to it. So I was very proud of the work that we did. It had a lot of it. It had a lot of impact. I mean, people, you and I together, we want to elevate the water dialogue to
Yep.
from the public all the way to elected officials. And I feel like we did a good job with that. And I wish I could have continued. And like I said, I'm thinking about getting back into it.
I wish that too. I hope you could continue. I had a lot of fun listening to your podcast. That was very good, very
Thank
good.
you.
Congrats, congrats. So, we often talk about water security as a future issue, but many of your findings suggest that it's a very present crisis as we know of it, right? In your view, what regions of the world are in most urgent need of attention, and what kind of interventions are working or failing, please?
Well, so we published a paper at the end of July, um, and I think it showed that basically everywhere needs attention
Yeah.
for different reasons.
Yeah.
And so we know the places that use a lot of groundwater, like the major aquifer systems of the world, whether we're in California or whether we're in the Guarani Aquifer or whether we're in northwestern India. These are places that need a lot of attention. Places, there are many hot spots around the world for where glaciers and snow are melting. So Alaska, Patagonia, around the Tibetan Plateau. These are places that are going to be first experiencing sort of extreme flooding because the glaciers are melting and there's outburst floods and things like that. But then that water will be gone. Um,
Sure.
so it's a real challenge. It's, I tend, because water is so complex and it touches so many things in our lives, I tend to think, just because otherwise I might go crazy, I tend to think about in terms of like needs and what should be done at sort of two levels. The level where I live, which is in Arizona right now in the United States. So we would call that at the state level. Um, and then at the national and global levels. So at the state level, I think around the world,
Yeah.
states, provinces, whatever your political boundaries are, when it comes to water, and especially when it comes to groundwater, we really need to be thinking about a sustainability plan. A sustainability plan that includes climate change, that includes the realities of how much water we need to grow food, that we need water for the environment, that we need water for economic growth. And so we have to really, you and I and our colleagues have to really message on the importance of that. At the national and global levels, I'll only speak about the United States and then maybe a little bit about Canada because I live there. In the United States, we actually made a lot of progress towards a national sort of groundwater strategy towards the end of the Biden administration. So in 2023 and 2024. Um, and we, the United States, produced a nice report, a nice blueprint for a pathway forward. But then the new administration came in, and it wasn't a priority. So that maybe, the next administration there'll be interest and that can be revived. Canada, I think, was doing a great job thinking about a Canada Water Act and a National Water Security Agency. This is when I was there. I think that they have moved forward on those things. But Canada's much worse shape than people think. I mean, it's warming very rapidly.
Exactly.
There's tremendous melting of snow and ice and thawing of permafrost. It's plagued by forest fires now.
Yes.
So there's issues there. Globally, I find a huge challenge, and for water in general, not just groundwater. And that is when we have our global climate discussions, more or less by necessity, they're focused on carbon dioxide. And
True.
so finding a pathway, an entry point for water is very, very difficult. And so I've been working with colleagues in UN Water, trying to move forward on finding those entry points. But I find that the problem is that it's almost like we're a little in an echo chamber. The people that come to those side events at those big meetings, at the COP meetings, at the Bonn Climate Conference, I was just at World Water Week in Stockholm. It's the same people. So we all agree, but we're just talking to ourselves. And so that's why I think,
Exactly.
programs like this one that you're doing, like the one that I used to do, we have to we have to reach a much broader audience
True.
to help them understand the importance of water.
True, true. Agree with you. Agree with you. I had while you were talking, I was thinking about something. When I first started studying hydrology and things, there was a professor that used to mention, those cubic kilometers of water here and there. And a friend of mine used to say that, oh, this guy looks like a Martian. He's looking from the space to Earth, right? Because he sees things, in a scale that we don't see, right? But today we have Grace that sees
Yes.
things exactly in that scale, right?
Yep.
So I understand that I'm studying all these topics, that we're starting to scratch the surface of the role of water in climate change. We're starting. Some of us are already aware of what's important, but I agree with you. We're failing to convince people that water is the major issue by far. But it's not only knowledge, it's communication, but also what do you think about the holistic view of water in the planet? Because this is something that seems like CO2. You mentioned CO2. Everybody
Yes.
today, they don't even know what CO2 is, but they know it's important somehow,
Right.
right? And we have to put some money into that topic and thinking about solutions on that. We're far from that on water. We should have many people thinking about water and how water could help saving the climate change or at least minimizing some of the problems. What do you think about that? Because we're both frustrated for sure.
Well, I agree. I think other fields have those metrics or those graphics or whatever it is, the chart that people look at and they understand. And so we struggle with that, especially at the global scale. I think it's a challenge, especially as we try to again elevate the awareness of the importance of water in the climate system. So in this paper that my team published at the end of July, we do some of that. And so we have some global diagrams that show, how sea level rise is increasing, ocean mass is increasing, and the contributions are coming from water from the land and water from Greenland and water from Antarctica. And so in there, then we've got this sort of almost like the Keeling CO2 curve, but just for all the water on land. It actually is going down. I keep motioning like it's going up, but it's going down. Um, and so that's a start, but still I think it's just hard for people to think about water. So there's a fundamental difference between CO2 and water. And CO2, it gets well mixed in the atmosphere very, very quickly. And it's true about water vapor, but most people, when we think about water, we're not even really thinking about our river basin, right? We're thinking about we turn on our tap and there's the
Exactly.
water.
So,
And so I think it's hard for people to engage and understand the importance. So there's a whole sort of human psychology to it that we need to figure out, what is the magic graphic or metric or set of or charts that get people to understand. It's really, really hard.
I understand. I understand that. I remember a guy saying once they're trying to reuse water, and then some guy came with a expression from toilet to tap, and that killed the water reuse because people got really scared about thinking, of drinking water that came from their own, toilet. And that's
Yep,
what
I
happens
know.
when you mention NASA. That's what happened on the space station, right?
Of course. And I mean, water is it's part of the water cycle. We're not drinking new water. It's, whether
All
it
the
flows
same.
through a plant or it flows through our bodies, it's in the system. And so we've been drinking recycled water forever. And even in
Exactly.
our rivers, right? For even aside from sewage recycling, which by the way is critically important.
Yeah.
Uh, but even aside from that, of course, we do the same thing in our rivers, right? You're an upstream city, you take in the water, you use it, you treat it, you put it back in the river, and then the downstream um, location then takes it, and does the same thing. So again, I think we have a messaging um, challenge on
Agree.
our hands.
I
So
agree.
just as an aside, so one of the first big sewage recycling plants in the United States was in Orange County,
In California.
California. And
Yeah.
that's right where when I was at UC Irvine, it was right there, just a few miles away. So we visited many times and took students there, and we got to know the management very well. And the manager at the time and it was called it was Orange County Water District Groundwater Replenishment System. And when I talked to the manager, Mike Marcus, he's retired now, about the efforts that they had to make to get that passed and to get it built, the communications efforts, the town
Right.
halls. He said they worked on it for about 5 years with education, town halls, just lots and lots and lots and lots of outreach until it finally happened.
Yeah. Yeah, I know it's a communication problem for sure. And it's I don't know. I don't know. I've been studying a lot that about studying communications, and we have to find ways, and that's something that we have to engage professional communicators. First, we have to talk to them, and they have to to be touched by the message, and they can translate. We are scientists, and we have a hard time translating that to a wider audience for sure, right? So I think that that's a first step that we should do. Not easy, but at least, well, but it's all a guess when we're talking between technical people, right? We need professionals to do that. Okay, so you've worked in both academic and institutional settings, including NASA, as you mentioned, right? Or University of Saskatchewan. You were Canadian for a long time. I know, like myself, me less 5 years on. How do you see the role of scientists evolving in public discourse, as you were mentioned, and decision making about water resources?
Well, I wish that we had more impact than we do.
Yeah,
And I think the impact, so my experience is it varies quite a bit. It really does. It almost depends on where you are and what the capacity is. So when I was in California, the state capacity to do water research um, was very, very high. And even, when I worked at NASA, I was still in California. So I was at UC Irvine and was at the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California. And I find it very, very difficult to work with the state agencies. In Arizona, it's been completely different. Arizona has less capacity. It's a big by land, but small by population. So smaller government, smaller, less resources, and so they're more willing to engage with us. And you know, across ASU, we're very much one of the interesting things about Arizona State University is its commitment to engagement and engaged research and stakeholder co-development of research with stakeholders.
interesting.
So I'd like us to play a higher role. I think that in the United States, there's, a lot of doubt being cast on scientists. That's a political thing. That sort of thing, the politics sort of swing back and forth. Um, but in general, I think because of the urgency of the things that we work on, whether we're talking about contaminated groundwater, polluted surface water, or climate change and changing extremes of flooding and drought, and all the things you and I have been talking about,
Yeah,
we really do need to work and engage um, with our elected officials, with our agencies, um, because we can't, you can't do it alone. I can't do it alone. They can't do it alone. I think it's a kind of an all hands on deck moment. And so I look for those opportunities to engage,
exactly.
whether it's global, I mentioned UN Water, they've been very, very accommodating. Um, in Arizona, it seems to be working out well, but other colleagues don't have the interest, and I think that they should, or they don't have the opportunities because of things I said, like California, for example, already has a big capacity. So we have to just keep trying.
I agree. I agree with you. I agree with you. Well, we're doing our part for sure. We're doing our
I hope
part.
so.
But we need more people for sure. We need more people for sure. I'm trying to engage more people on my side here. It's not easy to do that, right? And but well, let's see. I have a question for you that is related to groundwater. Since you're a hydrogeologist, you talk about water in general, but some of people that know you will be waiting for some hydrogeology question, right? So we all know that the groundwater is invisible to the public eye, right? I see your background screen there. You have lots of water there, but nobody sees the groundwater that is all connected to that water, right? And of course, it's essential for billions of people all over the world, right? How, you know, how can you try to make this mainstream, especially groundwater? You've tried that, you talk to people, you had that experience. You go to the World Water Week there, right? And sure, as groundwater is, most, liquid water, liquid fresh water is groundwater. But I know hydrogeologists are not a wide number in that in that meeting, right? So how can we
Fair enough.
bring that to people, and even talk to climate resilience and all the topics that are groundwater related, and we don't do, we try hard, but we don't.
So, um, I think we can agree that the science that we've been doing is not enough. I mean, we're doing great science,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
You and all of our colleagues are doing great work, but it's not enough because we have this, again, widespread spread groundwater depletion and contamination and so the science, obviously, just walking into a decision maker and saying, "See my paper," right? See what we found in this great paper is not enough. One of the things that I've been thinking about lately, and it does require connecting with professionals, as you mentioned, is really the storytelling side,
Yeah.
finding the importance. What's important in Brazil, is going to be different than what's important in here. I'm in right now. I'm in Phoenix. I'm in Scottsdale, Arizona, which is part of the Phoenix, the greater Phoenix area. So what's important to people now here in this area, data centers and computer chip, right? And computer chips and economic growth. And so showing people that, you need a lot of water to make the computer chip to run your iPhone. Sorry, I can't get that in there. So maybe it's food, letting people know that
Yep.
um, those strawberries and those blueberries, I mean, they're grown
Almost
with groundwater, whatever it is, right? Whatever that thing is, um, in a different region,
all
we
over.
have to figure out those narratives. So that's something that, I've been trying through, as you know, through various proposals
Exactly.
and have been
Exactly.
unsuccessful.
Well, partially successful, but
Yeah.
it's to have a world wave on that is another story. right?
Yeah.
We can reach some people, but we have to try and make it bigger. Well, as we mentioned here, I was always thinking about this the water cycle as a general and how the groundwater relates to that. Because we have the monitored aquifer recharge, for example. MAR. Only hydrogeologists understand that acronym, right? So it's a bad name for lay people, right? Because no, they don't know what's aquifer. Most people don't even
Right.
know exactly what aquifer is, right? So what's the thing? So, but one thing is that we have desertification, and desertification is close related to groundwater, how it infiltrates, how you have the soil moisture retain, how you have vegetation. So now people are trying or are starting to see that. We see many podcasts and people talking about that, how we can go like, for example, agroforestry or, permaculture and all that and still there. The idea is very nice because we can actually infiltrate more water as we increase that. But people don't care much. They don't even know exactly how groundwater behaves in that picture. So what I see that we are starting to develop a wider picture, like when you talk the flying rivers and how water goes to space and we can actually uh, use water vapor to decrease the temperature of the planet, for example, right? So this, I think, it's becoming to get connected. What do you think about that? Because you have that experience as well.
I think it's hard. And you're right. I mean, some communities do really well with their sort of signature statement, and others don't. And good point about managed aquifer recharge. Maybe we should just call it groundwater replenishment.
Sure.
Um, and that people might understand what that is.
Or water
Uh,
replenishment, even better. Water replenishment.
yeah, yeah. Um, so it's a huge challenge. Um, and I think for the most part, I think things are changing. Things have certainly, I've been at it for a while now, and I think in terms of public awareness, when I first started engaging with the public, it was more dangerous because people would just say, "Don't tell me about climate change," and
Oh,
I
yes,
just want
that's
I just
true.
want my water, and and now, of course, people are much more aware, and we're seeing the flooding and the drought and the catastrophes and in all, the fires. So it's hard to ignore. But still, in spite of all that, I think that there's still a disconnect between the experience, right? The flood or the drought, or you mentioned the desertification. And that's something people really understand. Like, wow, it's getting drier, but there's like a disconnect with the water part. They're getting drier because the water cycle is changing and there's not enough water, right? They tend to think of it in terms of land degradation, but not in terms of the decrease in the availability of water. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it was well said. We need to work with professionals and not just one or two,
Oh,
but
exactly. No, we have to
yeah.
bring the idea to the public and the marketeers, they should grab that and make it happen. Definitely.
Yes. That's right. So, the other challenge then is where does the funding come? So, okay, that's a great idea. But then where does the funding come from for that, right? For that marketing campaign, for that public awareness campaign. Really, really a challenge, but a great idea.
But I think that this is starting this started to happen already because I had a connection with a company. They're doing they're selling it's called volumetric
Oh
water
yeah.
benefit, right?
Yeah.
That is quite interesting because you attach a value not to water but to the benefit because the price of water is something hard to deal with people anywhere in the world. You have cultural attachments, you have whatever you mentioned is attached to water, right? Cultural, religious, everything. But then for the benefit, you try to you get away from the water in itself, but you just get a price for the benefit. That's very good. And some companies are already paying for that,
I know.
just
Yeah.
like they pay for carbon credit. So
Yep.
people are thinking on solutions on that. For example, you mentioned the big data centers. They're paying for that already. They're paying in Brazil.
Yes.
They don't have data centers here in Brazil, and they're paying for that. All right. So
Yeah. So no, I think you're right. I mean, I've seen some of that work, as a scientist and someone who's worked on that a little bit. I can be a little bit skeptical because it often is the private sector that is involved in developing those volumetric water benefits. And so again, as an academic, um, I would like to check their homework.
yeah, I agree. I
Uh,
agree. Well,
but
it's a
but
start.
the
I mean,
concept is very strong.
yeah.
Yeah, I have a student, a postdoc, who's working on water footprint labeling, um, and mainly for groceries and mainly for produce. And the first phase of her work is really on the sort of social acceptance. Like, would you pay more for produce that had a lower water footprint? Even things like what should this is it too much information? What about the carbon footprint? Are you going to be overwhelmed? What should the graphic look like? Um, so, it's we need to do it, but it's a challenge. There's
Agree.
information overload.
Agree, agree. I don't think it's gonna happen just but because people becoming aware because most of the water goes for food production, right? Most. And food is food, period. You're not gonna raise the prices of food, all right? And basically, water is almost free for food production, and nobody's gonna touch that. So we have to have ways around that of getting, finding solutions so we don't touch the food production, for example, or the
Oh, I,
prices.
I, I agree, but I would, I disagree in the sense that, I've been looking at aquifers that are seriously depleted.
Oh, yes, I
And so
know.
when you look at California and even Arizona
Oh,
and the Ogallala or the High Plains Aquifer in
yeah,
the
well,
United States,
exactly, exactly.
those places are, they're running out of water. And so it's not clear to me that food prices won't go up because
Oh, yeah, but that
I
but
mean
that but
it's
that but that is in the other end when it's already, because then you have a very serious problem. That's okay. That's okay. Then people have
yeah,
to pay because there's no way out.
that's
Right?
right. And
But
so,
then,
a lot of my work here is in communicating, it's showing people like that's the path we're on.
yeah,
And so we need to actually sustain our groundwater so that we don't get to that point where we're
exactly.
actually out of
Exactly.
water. And then the price does, and then
Perfect.
we've got a real crisis. We have a crisis that's in progress, but it's not, we haven't hit the bottom and the prices are not skyrocketing.
Yep.
But if we don't, now is the time for us to make some changes to ensure that sustainability for future generations.
I definitely agree. Well, we're talking about with climate change. We talk a lot about floods, right? And why don't we try to avoid floods using slow water infiltration? Increasing infiltration, because
Yeah, I think it's
lots of
great.
their that's a solution they're using in India. Wasn't the idea initially there, right? But it happened one state there that they tried that. They had 250,000 wells that were dry and now have water again,
That's
right?
amazing.
Or
So
no.
I hadn't heard that. So thank you for sharing that. Um, I agree. I mean, I think we need to go backwards. Uh, and so the problem we have in the United States is that there's so much development on the floodplains
Yep.
because there was much more interest in flood protection and no one thinking about recharging groundwater. And so let's channel that water out to the ocean and get,
Exactly.
so everyone is safe. And that has worked great. It's worked too well. So now the challenge for us is, can we go backwards?
Yeah.
And can we take some of that property back? And you know, we do it in the US anyway. We do it where we can, not at the scale that we should be, but we do it where we can. And you know, a little bit gets added, you know, probably like every day there's another few acres. So you know, I'm kind of coming to the point in my career where I'm happy with small changes. I see because the bigger change is the collection of the small changes.
Oh,
So
yeah,
it doesn't have
definitely.
to all happen tomorrow, but
No,
as long as you and I and our colleagues keep things on track, then you know, hopefully we'll leave things on a stronger trajectory towards sustainability.
I think, well, I totally agree with you. I just think that we have to set a north to all of us so we go to in the same direction. That's the main point.
I agree, and that's a challenge for
It
us, right? In
is.
our
It
field, people are
is.
interested in so many different things, and it's really hard to get people to rally around. I actually wrote a an essay for when I became an AGU fellow. They asked the fellows back then anyway, they would ask you to write something for the American Geophysical Union
Yeah,
hydrology newsletter. Um, and I wrote something on that around that point. Like we really need to, we do so many cool things, right? We do hundreds and hundreds of diverse things, and they're all really, really exciting. Um, but you know, we need some big questions to rally around. And it's hard. It's just hard. I think there's a lot of pressure for people, especially in academics, not
yeah.
to follow you, not to follow, you know, Everton's idea, but to come up or Jay's idea, but to come up with their own
Exactly.
idea, prove that they're brilliant.
Exactly, exactly. So we have all to follow one direction. Well, today I saw I interviewed Erica Guys. She writes for.
Yes, sure. She's great.
She's great. She's great, and she has the thing about her is that she has a cause which is very good, and it's a cause that we share, right? And she's not a hydrogeologist or hydrologist or anything, right? She has a background in literature and but she writes well, and she has a cause for slow water. Slow water means for us hydrogeologists infiltrating more water, right? Slow water kind of ring a bell, kind of ring a bell. It's a start in the direction that we're mentioning, right? At least
I agree. Yeah,
we can use that. But at least we have some people that are not us, the technical
I
guys,
know.
already thinking about that. It's a start. It's I'm optimistic in this case. What do you think?
Well, no, I agree. And I had Erica on the What About Water podcast and
Yep.
you know, had a similar conversation probably to one that you did. And but you make me think about, you know, whether it's time for like an international workshop on sort of like, okay, let's rally around let's identify one or two questions, right? Get people together and say, like you said, we all have to point in the same direction.
Exactly. And
And
that's
so let's
I'm
have the
actually
right
I'm
the
planning to organize that meeting.
compass workshop. Yeah, we need to go to True North.
Yep. And get people involved and see what's going on. There are many people working on that. Let's see. Okay. So, final questions for those watching this who are passionate but unsure of how to contribute, students, professionals, or ordinary citizens. Those are the ones that we're trying to grab, right? What message or advice would you share with them so they can have something in mind when they listen to the podcast, or when we prepare the reels for advertising that, for example?
Yeah, get involved and get educated. There's always going to be some kind of a local watershed group or right or a aquifer group. You know, I've seen these things whether I live in Texas or California or here. They are there. Make sure you are educated, read the papers, find the good in your region. You know, luckily in the United States, we have a few key water reporters who are very good. Follow them, be well read, be well educated. Universities like yours and mine, they have all kinds of seminars. So
Exactly.
many of them are open to the public. So just go for it. Dive in, no pun intended. Dive in, immerse yourself.
Thank you very much. So Jay, thank you so much for doing, for being with us today and for sharing your deep knowledge, passion, and clarity on the water challenges we face. Thank you very much. Your work is for me, it's an inspiration, not just to the scientific community, but to everyone who believes that protecting water is key to a sustainable and just future. Please, let's keep our conversation going and see if we can put some more work together for like no better guardians of water. Come back to your podcast. I'm looking forward to that. That was very, very nice. I learned a lot, and I'm pretty sure lots of other people did as well. As I mentioned to you, today, more people call me Professor Agua than Everton by the podcast and the work of, oh,
Very good.
it's
Yeah.
working. It's
Very,
working.
very good. So I had a neighbor who, the first time I spoke to him, we didn't realize we were neighbors. And but he saw a video that I was on YouTube.
Oh,
So he didn't call me Professor Agua or he didn't call me Professor J. He looked at me and he said, YouTube. Uh, so we know that this stuff works. So it's great. And thank you so much for your kind words, Professor Agua. Everton, it's just been a pleasure, a lot of fun to have this conversation. And yeah, well, you used a phrase there that I really like, the Guardians of Water. And so let's keep it up and let's build the army.
okay, we'll do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you soon. Take care.
Bye bye.